have a tendency to rattle many people, but at the same time, it's through these kind of incidents as well, where we get to really evaluate how we respond and react to certain issues as well. It's also important, and I would like to highlight that we condemn these acts as well. These are senseless acts. They have resulted in the destruction of not only lives, but also the destruction of property, which really goes against the growth orientation and the growth path that this country is currently following. And particularly in a period of Ethiopia's history right now, where so many spaces have opened up politically for people, for political parties, for individuals to engage in a meaningful way. And also when we have started the journey of embarking on really revitalizing and reviewing our economic potential and also strengthening our foreign relations, and really also focusing on this aspect of dialogue, where previous spaces did not allow for people to come together and engage in dialogue, where there's calls by the central government and also specifically by the Prime Minister to come sit at the table and share ideas, being able to express discontent and express things that we do not agree with in a violent way, is really working against Ethiopia and working specifically against Ethiopians, all that people have labored for as well. It's also important for us to pay particular attention to people who have played a key role over the past week. We want to express gratitude to religious elders. We want to also give gratitude to traditional elders who have done a lot of reconciliation work and convened dialogues. But at the same time, in addition to efforts by the federal government in partnership with the regional governments to attend to the destruction, there have been also local people, average people, volunteers who have engaged in supporting their fellow Ethiopians as well. So it's really important to highlight the role of these kind of volunteers and really celebrate them as well. So on behalf of the Prime Minister's office, we want to also express those thanks. With regards to the update on the post-violence work that has been done, following the violent conflict last week, which has claimed those lives, the federal and regional government have been working in sync to address the violence in 4 ways in particular. So the first primary task has been containing the violence. So per the request, because the federal government always enters regional governments per the request that they extend. So per the Oromo and Harari regional governments, the security apparatus and national defense forces, together with their regional counterparts, have been doing containment work to ensure that the violence doesn't spread, to ensure that the violence doesn't intensify and the destruction of lives and properties is not exacerbated. So the National Army was deployed to stop the instability and bring calm in Ambo, Bishoftu, Balerobe, Dodola, Mojo, Adama, Dreda, and Harar City, upon the request of the regional governments and the city as well. So through this operation of containment, the security apparatus has been really successful in containing it and ensuring that the violence does not intensify. Although the violence did take on ethnic and religious components to it as well. So that containment work was one of the key interventions. The second work that has been done is in terms of bringing perpetrators into custody, and also the investigation work has begun, and this will continue. The latest information that I have in terms of perpetrators that have been apprehended is 409 individuals that have been apprehended. So these figures are also subject to change, obviously, as the investigation work continues and proceeds. But rest assured that the ongoing investigation work and the ongoing work to hold all perpetrators accountable is going to ensure that people who have committed these crimes and people who have been agents of perpetrating these crimes as well will also be held accountable. The third aspect is humanitarian support for victims of or survivors of the violence. So efforts by health workers, government health workers, in terms of tending to the needs, immediate needs of those that have survived the attacks has been ongoing. At the same time, there have been people that have also been displaced and their properties disrupted as part of this. So there has been work, again, on the invitation of the regional government for federal intervention to provide emergency food and non-food materials as well. So this has been also emergency assistance that has been going on over the past week. And lastly, a key component, which is a key foundation to sustaining peace and stability, not only in these particular areas, but in the whole country itself, is the reconciliation work that elders, national elders and traditional and religious leaders have been engaging with the affected communities. So these discussions are ongoing, and also high-level government officials, including the Prime Minister, have also been to some of these locations as well and engaged with the local communities to understand what were the challenges, what are the divides, and be able to also address them. So these things will also continue because they're critical components of the peace-building work. I think it's also a little bit important to reflect on why these incidents happen, because there has been incidents, and there is a larger operating context which I think it's important to draw attention to. So the federal government does recognize that there are fundamental challenges that the country is faced with, including security threats as well. And it's a complex and dynamic environment that we're operating in. And noting the complexities and noting the demands that the country is faced at the moment, there has been a lot of short-term and long-term reforms that have been underway to address some of these challenges as well. So institution building has also been one key component of it, and particularly within the security apparatus and the security sector. But amidst these changing processes, however, there's also what we recognize to be significant obstructions that have been attempting to derail these reforms process. I don't think I need to draw your attention to the gains that have been made over the past year in terms of really opening up the spaces and attempting to nurture the democratization process and attempting to cater to a budding democracy. But there are also elements we're working to derail these reforms process and give the impression that the government is uncaring, that the government is weak, and many forces do want to force this kind of narrative as well. Because one thing that is very obvious, and which I think a lot of people have witnessed over the past year, is that this administration has really, really wanted to change the narrative of how Ethiopia has operated before. It has been an administration that has been advocating for peace. It has been an administration that has been advocating for reconciliation. Love and forgiveness have been part of the anchors of how this administration operates. Patience, and then also particularly bringing in the spirit of dialogue, has been a key component of this administration. So as we're moving along through these reforms processes, the patience that central government has been showing, the federal government has been showing, has been utilized or served to give the impression of delegitimizing it, whereas this is an intentional strategy by the central government, because we do not want to take Ethiopia back to where it used to be. So any efforts to undermine these processes of reconciliation, peace, and the new kind of hope that is being built in Ethiopia is being challenged as well. So the key challenges that we say that threaten this reforms process and are contributing to these incidents, one of them is, like I had mentioned already, involvement of forces aiming to undermine progress for political gains as well, which is unfortunate, because I think any kind of political gains or political power that can be claimed is dependent on ensuring that there is a unified country, that citizens are safe as well. So, innocent civilians and innocent citizens should not be sacrificed in order to bring about political gains. So there is no doubt there are forces continuously working to undermine the current reforms as well, and we are cognizant of the fact that these are fueled by a number of factors, and again, not excluding this push to create a climate of fear, to create a climate of, or to instill feelings of hopelessness among people, specifically because a lot of hope has been built over the past year, and this hope is not empty. There have been visible gains to why people have been hopeful as well. So people or agents working to undermine these efforts are also trying to derail the reforms process. At the same time, I was also saying the new administration's commitment to democratizing and identifying various forms of oppression. As you know, this administration has been very honest about some of the egregious human rights violations that had happened before as well, and has owned up to them, and as a result has made tremendous shifts in terms of really trying to turn around the narrative of Ethiopia as a human rights violating country. So these things and these attempts are also perceived as a threat and fueling this fear and narrative. At the same time, there are also efforts to push divides between leadership as well. And so these are also factors that are manifesting in why such incidents are also occurring. The second aspect, and which I'm not going to delve much into because the political parties, the spokesperson are responsible to speaking to that, but part of why we're seeing why we're seeing is also a backlash to the current acceleration to unify the main party or the ruling party. But I think because there's also a narrative around the moves to unify the party that are being spun that are misrepresentative of what the true intentions of these moves are. And it's also important to give it context because within the past year and a half of the political space also opening up, we've seen a number of groups also registering as political parties. So we have seen an increase of political parties that are registering over 130. So I think in a country like Ethiopia, the move to unify parties, or the call that has been made by the Prime Minister as well as the federal government for political parties to come together, to coalesce, to merge coalitions and merge into larger groups is really a critical factor to Ethiopia's stability, to Ethiopia's unity, and ensuring that there's diversity of ideas, that these ideas are not fragmented and fractured over more than 130 parties, but really bringing in key policy options, key ideological options as well. So, but nevertheless, we see the continuation of such violent acts as a response to resisting the merger of the ruling party, and they're labeled as anti-federalist or unitary as well, which is a very erroneous, again, assumption in terms of the true intentions. If at all, the merger of the ruling party is going to facilitate more alignment between the federal government and the regional governments. It's going to facilitate or encourage the strengthening of federalism and the true application of federalism within Ethiopia, rather than this perspective that it's a unitary and anti-federalist approach. And at the end of the day, it's also really important to highlight that the federal system is not something that any particular person or group can snatch from Ethiopians. The Ethiopian people have paid a huge sacrifice for the gains that have been made up to today, including the design of the federal system as well. And if anything, there are efforts and there's a commitment from the federal government as well as the ruling party to be able to encourage the strengthening of the federal system and the right application of the federal system. Finally, the third challenge around this is related to mindsets as well, and we cannot really undermine the extent to which assumptions, perspectives, and entrenched attitudes that now with the change of various thought processes within the country that are manifesting in different reforms, that would be a challenge in of itself as well. It's something that we've accumulated over time. And the importance of these mindsets is that they're reflected in our institution building or the stresses that are on our institutions. They're also reflected through our democratic processes or a regression by some groups as well in terms of these democratic processes. And they also may interfere in terms of people's or the government striving for prosperity as well. So that is one critical challenge, but it's not a challenge that is not being addressed. In fact, one of the key priorities of this administration is really to work on those aspects as well, because ensuring that a united Ethiopia or an Ethiopia in which people have a united perspective, not necessarily united and have the same ideas and so on, but particularly in terms of a shared vision and a shared goal, is something that will guarantee the stability of the country as well. So this attitude towards how we perceive each other, how we engage with each other as well, and how we think our institutions should function, and how we work towards strengthening and utilizing institutions to bring about the changes that we want is also something that is being critically addressed. So at a time when the government is working for democracy, working for peace, prosperity, human rights, such incidents do become barriers to growth as well, and we do recognize that, and it's also called upon different stakeholders to really support in terms of nurturing the gains that have been made over the past year and a half. Again, like I have said, there have been a lot of sacrifices that have been paid to bring about these changes as well. With regards to what are the measures that have been undertaken in terms of ensuring stability and peace, and ongoing measures as well, I just want to highlight a few ones, and then during our Q&A we could also address some of them. But number one is the commitment from the government in terms of maintaining the rule of law is still there. It's still very strong, as evidenced through the work that has been done over the past week in terms of bringing or apprehending those that are responsible for these acts. But also, if you look at the past year and a half with such similar incidents, about 3,000 or more than 3,000 people have been apprehended for the crimes that they have committed in these kind of violent acts as well over the past year and a half. So this is a critical figure that shows you that the security apparatus as well as the rule of law bodies are also functioning across the federal and the regional states, although sometimes they might not be highlighted, giving the impression that this work is not happening. Secondly, with regards to reforms that I have been talking about, the security apparatus is one component or institution that has been a main focus of reforms as well, to ensure that the fear-mongering narrative that we've had before, to ensure that the institution that has been a source of terrorizing people as well, engaging in bodily harm to people as well, and really threatening the existence of people who may have been perceived to work against the state at some point in time. So as to change that impression, there's been a lot of work, and there's still ongoing work within the security sector apparatus to change that. Particularly, you see this evidenced within NIS as well. Second one is in terms of capacity building. This is always going, capacity building measures to ensure that law enforcement entities are well capacitated to attend to their needs.